Right. I hope you guys enjoy the opening night set of films. My name is Sino Hinojosa. I am the co-founder and the programmer for the San Jose International Short Film Festival, and I am very, very excited to bring in one of the filmmakers from the block that you just saw. I have Zach Woods right here. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for watching the movie.
You know what? I loved your movie. We'll talk about the movie in just a second. Let's talk about you first, because you know what?
Okay.
Is this your directorial debut?
Yeah, I've never directed anything. I directed a few stage shows back at a comedy theater in New York, but the first thing on camera that I've directed, I really found it completely thrilling.
Part of directing has always been that there's a level of control, but there's also a level where you almost stand back and let everything happen.
That's a really good point. I think when you're an actor, there's so much sort of fussing over you. Even if you're there for just a small part, people are doing your makeup and your hair and making sure that your collar is at the right angle. And there's a lot of attention placed on you as an individual. And sort of your job as an actor is to take your attention and rest it off yourself and put it on something else, something more worthy that will then make the story come alive. When you're directing, the attention naturally lands on other people, and it is kind of a relief in that way because you have very little sort of bandwidth left after you've answered everyone's questions and set up the shot, and there's very little sort of mental room left to turn back on yourself into a self-conscious experience. So it's sort of self-forgetful in a way that's really nice.
I would think that it would allow you a different way of looking because you have the actor's perspective you're coming in with.
Well, I think it's like it felt like hosting a party or something where you just want to set the conditions for everybody to have the best, most sort of alive experience that you can. And I think that's different for different people. But then my main experience of directing in terms of the actors was just gratitude because I got all the people I asked to do it, did it. And they were so generous. You know, there's I was talking about this with someone else recently. Like, there's two ways that you can show up as an actor. You can sort of commit to be in a place at a time and show up and do it. And then there's the more sort of profound form of commitment, which is like not just showing up, but really showing up with your heart, you know? And it's a lot to ask actors of the caliber that are in that movie to show up just physically in person. But the fact that they showed up in such a emotionally generous way was so moving to me, and that these really seasoned actors seemed sort of like little kids playing. You know, it felt very free and excited and curious and experimental, and that's a credit to them more than anything I did. It was just their willingness to sort of let fly.
Well, tell me a little bit about the story. Where did the story come from?
Write a lot with my friend and writing partner Brandon Gardner, and we were talking about a story that's sort of about people struggling to reconcile their seemingly sort of incompatible needs, basically. So that's a pretty esoteric sounding answer, but basically, like, you know, I've always been sort of interested in the question of like, is there enough to go around in situations? Sometimes it's easy to worry that if someone else has their needs met, maybe mine won't be met, you know? And so situations in which characters have sort of pressing, dire emotional needs and are trying to figure out a way to make everybody fit are interesting to me. So that's sort of a slightly airy-fairy answer, and I guess describes literally any story ever, like characters with needs trying to get them met.
Yeah,
but
we're going to go a little broad. We're going to go a little broad. So.
I wanted to do something that took place on a location with individuals in it, and that was, but it was.
We're going to do something that's a little performance-based, maybe some acting,
but with a camera,
lights.
Yeah, it was also my dad's a therapist, and our relationship bears very little resemblance to the one in the movie. But I always thought it was interesting. You know, we'd be on family vacations or things, and he would get calls from his answering service because there'd be an urgent situation with a patient, and he'd have to go off and deal with that sometimes. So that was always sort of an interesting moment in my childhood, and also carried into the story in a way.
So talk to me about the casting process and how you got everybody that you wanted.
Well, I think casting is often like, it's almost like having a crush. It's like it's such a um it's almost like a physical thing where you're like, I want you for this part. It's such a yearning, and the sort of like pitter patter that your heart does when you're waiting to hear if the person will do it. It's like asking for a date or something. I mean, for me, I'd worked with Will Ferrell a few times, and most recently on a movie where he got to do some more sort of dramatic scenes. And I've always thought that in addition to being like the funniest actor alive, he also has a lot of depth and sensitivity and honesty in his performing and commitment. Even when he's playing the biggest, craziest character, he commits so hard and isn't like winking from behind the character. He just is committing to those people. So I was just desperate to work with him because I just like being around him, and I so admire his work. And then William Jackson Harper, I'd actually seen in the Jim Jarmusch movie Patterson years ago, and I was like, who is that? That guy is so funny and strange and has such a rhythm that is all his own. I remember I was a jazz nerd when I was a kid, and I remember hearing this Thelonious Monk quote that was, "Genius is he that is most himself." And I think like William Jackson Harper is a great example of that, where he's so distinct and specific, and it makes him sort of irresistible. And then Fred Hechinger, I'd seen in eighth grade, the Bo Burnham movie, for just a second. He's in it as a kid in a cafeteria. Um, and it was one of those things. It's like, it's like you see someone at a party and you just love at first sight. You just feel like, oh my God, I really want to work with you. And it's nice to know that like when I got all those guys, I asked them all and they all said yes. And then the experience, so rarely do expectations actually deliver. Like I feel like very often things are anticlimactic. These guys surpassed it. It was my fantasies and then some. It's one of the happiest feelings I've ever had was on the set of that movie.
Comedians always run that fine line. I always go back thinking about, the really sad comedians back in the 30s and 40s and 50s and how they were like that, always on that edge of uh, possibly the world ending, everything being really terrible and awful. And for them, it's like, you always felt like there was something.
Well, even like old Charlie Chaplin movies, like you watch City Lights, like City Lights is heartbreaking. Like The Great Dictator, all these movies, they all have like a really melancholy sort of bass note.
Your story could have been completely a full out comedy if it wanted to be. It could, but the fact is the drama of the experience. It felt more authentic. It felt real.
That's
And
good.
so now, when you're doing it, when you're actually, watching everything on camera and it's all working, do you stand back? Do you take a moment to actually make yourself aware of what's happening? Because this is
Hmm.
your first time, or were you just too involved?
That's an interesting question. Like, do you sort of step back and look at it all and think, oh my God? I guess I think on the drive home and on the drive there, once
Right.
you're there, you're sort of in the rushing
Right.
water. But
Yeah.
right before and right after, it's like, wow, what a crazy gift this is. I mean, it seems completely surreal. I used to watch Will Ferrell sketches again and again and again on the Best of Will Ferrell SNL DVD when I was like in college, or and the idea that you'd be able to direct someone like that, or the other guys who I think are equally powerhouses. It's just so unlikely, and I'm so appreciative of it.
Did you feel like you had to push in any direction, or you knew these were the right people and you just let it happen?
No, I mean, you try to help them out. Like, so for me as an actor, the thing that's often most helpful is someone telling me what they experienced based on the last take. Okay, that felt like he was blank. So then I know it's like, okay, that's how it's reading. That's helpful sometimes. The other thing that's even more helpful is just giving you experiments to try, even if they fail, something to sort of whet your creative appetite, or to stimulate you in a new direction. And even if the initial idea doesn't turn out to be the right one, it can sometimes get you to the next idea, which is the right one. So just giving people sort of little prompts of things to try, or thoughts that the character might have, or you know reasons for doing particular things to experiment with. And then I always say, like, only use it if it's helpful. You know, there's no, the sort of test of direction is whether it actually gets anything going. You know, it's like you can have a sort of a beautiful academic idea that doesn't make anyone's blood pump faster, and if it doesn't, then it's not really that useful. With William Jackson Harper, I think, like, you're right, like the way he listens has so much information in it. And I also think I love actors that leave room for the audience. In other words, like, I remember hearing a quote that, like, a performance takes place halfway between the performer's imagination and the audience's. So if somebody is indicating a lot and making faces and demanding that you know that this is the specific experience that they're having, you can feel a little bullied as an audience member, and there's not enough room for you to bring your own associations to bear and your own memories and your own hopes and whatever that you would, if the performer is a little more restrained, that you can then project onto that character, and it becomes a version of the character that's specific to you. And I think William Jackson Harper is like virtuosic in striking that balance between making very, very specific choices and being incredibly vivid, but also leaving space for you as an audience member to engage.
When you say that you saw somebody and you said, "Oh, I'd like to work with that person. I'd like to work with this person," were you always thinking that, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to direct at some point"? Was that always in the back, or is it just?
No, it actually wasn't. It's more just like a strange, like, affinity. I think initially when I saw some of those people, I was like, oh, I would love to act with them. But it's more just like, I'm sorry, I'm just like, I basically just answer in quotes. But I remember hearing the filmmaker Mike Mills say about Annette Bening that when she's acting, she's always looking for the thing in the scene that makes it sort of alive or dangerous or unpredictable or specific. That it's like, almost like, I don't know if you use this metaphor, but it's like a shark, like looking for that thing that's gonna ignite. A shark looking for things to ignite is the mixedest of all metaphors.
I love it. That's great.
It's an explosive shark. Annette Bening is an explosive shark.
Laser beam eyes or something along those lines, because
Yeah,
you want to
exactly,
get the whole picture.
So actors who have that, who feel a little dangerous and a little unpredictable,
Mhm.
even in a quiet way, like William Jackson Harper does in this, you know, those are the people I'm always like, ooh, what's going on with them?
It's interesting to watch the simmer and the build, and that's, to me, is such an exciting performance. Was this something where it's just like, I'm between things, I have 2 weekends off, I can do this? Or, I mean, how did this come about?
I think the first part of it was watching Will on that movie we worked on together and just being like, I really want to direct him, which is a strange feeling, but one I wanted to follow. The other part of it was I'm such a, like, choosy little freak when it comes to acting stuff. Like, I'm so obnoxiously selective, but I also don't have the cachet to really justify that degree of selectiveness. So it's one thing if you're like, you know, whatever, Adam Driver, then you can choose, or, you know, I don't know, like, you know, Dom Hall Gleason or something. But you know, then it's like you can say this, not that. But if you're me, like, I'm very selective, but it's not like people are banging down my door to be in movies, like the lead in big movies. So I realized, I'm like, if I'm going to be so selective, I have to start making things, because if you wait for the perfect thing to come along, the chances of you actually getting to do that perfect thing are fairly small to begin with. And I guess I realized, like, I don't want to just be someone who says no to um auditions for my living. You know, I want to actually make stuff, and that requires me to actually make stuff.
Was this ever something that was bigger? Was this something that you ever wanted, that you saw as a larger story, or is it always in the short form?
No, just it's his own little short self-contained thing. I mean, I really like not being babied as an audience member. Like, I like it when director is demanding of me as an audience member. It's sort of connected to what we were just talking about, where an actor who doesn't trust you enough to engage with the story on your own and has to bully you into a particular reaction. Or people talk about the cliches like the swelling strings, where they're telling you, oh, now's the moment where you're supposed to feel moved. I like it when directors leave room for the Holy Spirit, so to speak. And like, I think that shorts, like you said, it's like it's kind of a necessity because you have so little time. So you have to trust the audience to bring a lot to bear on the material. And I think that's one of the virtues of shorts.
Are you lining up other jobs where you want to direct stories that you want to direct, or the things that you want to do?
I actually just shot another short that I'm currently editing. That's very, very different from this one. It was really, really fun to shoot. So I'm sort of immersed in that and not thinking too far ahead, but I'm excited to show you guys that one too, whenever it's ready.
When you first see footage and you start looking through stuff, what is that feeling like when you're kind of going through it for the first time?
Shot this on 16 millimeters, the the processing time for film, if you're shooting digital, you're seeing it on the monitor pretty much as it's going to appear in the movie. You can do color correction, obviously, but it's, you're seeing the capture. With 16 millimeter, we had to wait for the film to be processed. So by the time I saw a single image of the shoot was done. So it's an incredibly suspenseful thing where you think like, oh my God, what if there was, the roll was flashed or there was something in the gate of the camera or whatever. You're just worried that like there's been some technical mishap that has made all that beautiful work everyone was doing irrelevant. But so my main, to answer your question, my main experience of seeing the footage for the first time was just like relief, where I was like, oh, good, the camera worked. And then I just thought it was beautiful. I just loved the way it looked. I loved the performances. I was just thrilled. And then it's the like Frankensteining it all together takes forever because when someone, with all the departments, the production designer, the cinematographer, Andre Lascaris, who's a genius, when those people, the operators, everyone, the production team, when they show up in such a generous and wholehearted way, you really feel like duty bound to them to make sure that you're creating the greatest possible version of the movie in the edit. So it takes a lot of time because you're kind of going over everything with a jeweler's knot. But I enjoyed it.
Now, what was the choice between not shooting on digital with versus shooting on film?
I wanted to shoot on film because it's a movie that sort of celebrates warmth and mess. And I think that film is warmer and it's also messier and it's more alive. Film, you sacrifice perfectibility for aliveness, I think. And so thematically it felt kind of related. I also think part of having a big movie star and a television star in your short, you want to disconnect the audiences. You want to disconnect the audience from their sort of version of those actors as quickly as possible. So I don't want people to be thinking about Anchorman when they're watching David. And I think shooting on 16 millimeter, you've never seen Will Ferrell on 16 millimeter before, I don't think. So it just puts him in a different light. William Jackson Harper, I don't think I've ever seen him in 16 millimeter. So it sort of makes the familiar foreign in a way that I think is good for the suspension of disbelief.
Well, believe me, I feel you. I in the other room, this is my office where I am right now. I do have a 60 millimeter camera as well, sitting next to a red, so I get both sides of it. So I'm always been a big
glaring
fan.
At each other.
Well, I remember shooting an 8 millimeter, when I was a kid, and you think about the setting something away and getting it processed or learning how to do things. There is something about that almost anxiety and the expectation of waiting for it to come back. And then when it finally comes back, thank God, it's
Yes.
it works and
Right.
everything's okay. Now, when you as a performer, you have you're right. You have a very very specific choice to make every time you find a role. So you're known for a lot of different things. Silicon Valley. Here, obviously, we are in the heart of Silicon Valley. So. Thank you for portraying everybody that I know when I go meet them on every business meeting. I swear it feels so.
I'm sorry.
It was just so strange to watch the show and feel like, Wow, these are my people. And I know that sounds terrible, but it's so true. That was just a terrific show, and it was just so
Oh,
much
that you
fun.
liked it.
Oh, absolutely. 1 or 2 years ago, something you did online for like Vanity Fair about going fishing or living in the woods or something along those lines.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was like a GQ thing, I think.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, GQ. Sorry about that. I know.
How dare you
I
mistake
know. I
my
know.
fleeting fashion
You know what I was getting at was the fact that doing short form anything is such a gift to an audience. What is that like to be able to continue to make either short form content or make other things, and then also go back to the larger scale projects that you do? I mean,
It's crazy. It's so lucky. I feel so deliriously lucky. I mean, because yeah, I mean, one sort of pays for your life and is also creatively fulfilling, and the other one allows you to sort of experiment and follow your own curiosity. I mean, it's really remarkable. All I can really say is just like how lucky I feel. And beyond that, when I started to become interested in directing, anytime I was on set on Silicon Valley, I'd talk to the camera, a camera, and say, "Hey, Harry, like, explain to me, like, so if you're shooting anamorphic, how does that affect where you would position the camera in this blah blah blah, whatever it is." Like, just asking him all these little questions. Or I asked the sound guy, it's like, okay, so lavaliers versus hidden mics or whatever. They would tell me. And what's so nice is when you're on set, especially if you're like a coddled actor, but probably I think for everyone, people are willing and in fact eager to share their wisdom with you. So working on these big productions, you're around these really masterful technicians and artists who know all this stuff, and they're willing to share that wisdom with you if you just ask. So it's also been kind of a film school for me, where I can just talk to the people around me while they're setting up the lights, and they'll tell me what they know.
I do think that sharing of knowledge and the ability to kind of like give that freely is such a wonderful thing. And I do find filmmakers to be, very giving in that way.
I agree. Fred Hechinger, I hope I'm allowed to tell this story, but I think it's okay. But Fred Hechinger, the guy who plays the kid, he
David
told me
too.
this. David, yeah, he told me that when he was a little kid, he went to Barnes and Noble and Guillermo del Toro to go hear Guillermo del Toro talk about Hellboy 2, because he loved it with his dad. And he went up to Guillermo del Toro and started talking to him about the graphic novels and the movies. He was a film buff, I think, from a young age. And Guillermo del Toro gave him his personal credit card and was like, go buy all, whatever comics you need, basically. Like, recognize like a kid. It makes me like feel like crying. It's like recognizing this giant international director, recognizing like a kindred spirit in the form of this little kid and wanting to subsidize his passion in some way. It's so moving. And like you said, it's just part of that whole sort of collective ownership of it, of all the knowledge, where it's like, okay, I have it, I'll give it to you. And now here's Fred Hechinger, and he's a genius actor, and he's directing, and I'm sure one day Fred Hechinger will give his credit card to some little kid to buy whatever. I guess then it'll be like holograms or something, but he'll pay it forward.
Well, we'll see about people hitting him up on Instagram today. But no, shh, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, yeah, right.
No film is ever finished, So what did you leave out? And or what did you really want to have in there? And you said it just doesn't work, or it doesn't.
That's so funny. Yeah, there's that great line. Someone, I think they said about poems, where they're like, poems are never finished, they're just abandoned.
Oh
I
yeah,
always like that. I think I mean, there was
film.
so much stuff that I
And
loved.
just so
It
you
just
know, films are wrenched out of the hands of filmmakers screaming. That's how they come. They never come easy. A filmmaker is going to say, "Well, but wait, we can just color time this, or we can do that." There's always something
it's
more.
funny. One of the virtues of producing it, like financing, I financed it. I mean, I had producers who did the actual producing, but um I was sort of on my own schedule. And so this was like the most sort of indulgent version of making a movie that exists. But there was still stuff that just didn't fit in the narrative. Like, one time, right at the end, we let the camera roll and I started playing music, after that last shot. and Fred started to dance. He did this strange, like beautiful dance with blood running down his face. It was so joyful and weird. And then like the referee came in and he started dancing with him, and then the hoagie came in and he was dancing, and it was this very weird sort of bloody beautiful dance, which I loved so much. But it didn't really work in the cut, but I would have loved to have included that.
Did it deliver in that first cut that you saw? Did it deliver everything you wanted? Was it, or was there a lot of tweaking throughout?
Tons of tweaking. I mean, my friend Nick Paley is a director himself. He's directed Broad City and Amy Schumer's show and all kinds of stuff. And he's also a writer. He's written all these beautiful screenplays. But he edited it for me because he's my dear friend. And so we sat together and just did 1,001 experiments. Where we'd be like, okay, let's try this thing. That's okay. What if we added 2 frames there? What if we, made the door creak a tiny bit louder? I mean, just like obsessive compulsive kind of like 2 nerds with their model, like moving the little Civil War soldier back and forth.
Well, normally we do this in person, obviously, but the filmmakers and the audience get to sit down and talk, and we have these conversations. And even after the film screening is over, they'll grab a filmmaker and pull them off the side and ask them 40 questions. So believe me,
that's nice.
It's always part of the game, and it's always part of the thing that I honestly, that is precious to me, that I appreciate the most. So I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
God, thank you. Thank you for being curious about it, and for making a home for short films. And I agree with you, like feeling connected through work and excited about it is like, that's what everyone I think wants. So thank you for creating a forum in which that can happen.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you. Have a good one.